Cold open, midnight to 1 o'clock. The glove was found near the driveway. Not dropped by accident, placed. Whoever left it there had planned for the cameras, planned for the blood, planned for the walk out of that neighborhood without a single neighbor recognizing the silhouette on the footage. It is now more than 100 days since 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in Tucson, Arizona, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department is sitting on thousands of videos, unknown DNA, and a reward that crossed $1 million with 0 takers. This is not a case where the evidence ran dry. This is a case where the evidence multiplied faster than anyone could process it. And buried inside that mountain of footage, biological material, and competing agency narratives is what investigators are calling the closest thing they have to a break. The question is whether they can reach it before this becomes something else entirely. This is the story of what one investigator called the deliberate blind spot. Act 1, 1 to 3 o'clock. Nancy Guthrie was not a fragile woman. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. Sharp as a tack, present, opinionated, alive in the way some people in their 80s simply are not. She had raised Savannah Guthrie, the Today Show co-host watched by millions of Americans every morning. But Nancy was not defined by her daughter's fame. She was defined by her routines. Church on Sunday. Dinner with family. The rhythms of a life built over 8 decades in a neighborhood she trusted. On January 31st, she came home from dinner with her daughter and son-in-law. That was the last confirmed moment anyone who loved her saw her. The next morning, when she did not appear at church, the people who knew those rhythms understood immediately that something was wrong. What investigators found at the scene was not consistent with a woman who wandered. According to Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, speaking to People magazine, search and rescue personnel arrived and recognized almost immediately that what they were looking at was suspicious. There was blood. It was later confirmed as Nancy's own. But there was also additional DNA at the scene. DNA that, as of this recording, has not been matched to any known suspect. The biggest weakness in the public narrative right now is this. More than 100 days in, we have biological evidence, we have camera footage, we have over 13,000 FBI tips, and no arrest. That gap is not evidence of failure. According to retired Police Sergeant Troy Hillman, author of a documented Arizona cold case investigation, it is evidence of a case being built the right way. He told Law and Crime, they're probably still going back through that list, saying, okay, let's isolate the ones that are really good that we need to revisit. The deliberate blind spot in this investigation is not what investigators are missing. It is what they are deliberately withholding from public view while the case is being assembled. RE Hook number 1, 3 o'clock. The security footage shows someone approaching Nancy Guthrie's home wearing a holster and gloves. Investigators traced the gloves to a Walmart purchase. Over 100 days later, nobody has called in to say they recognize that walk. Act 1 continues, 3 to 6 o'clock. Tucson sits in the Sonoran Desert, where the summer temperatures crack 110 degrees and the winter nights drop fast. It is not a small town in the way people imagine small towns. Pima County covers nearly 9,200 square miles, and the city sprawls across a basin ringed by 5 mountain ranges. It is a place where someone can disappear into geography as easily as into anonymity. That physical reality matters here. The security camera footage from outside Nancy's home became the case's most discussed artifact. The figure visible on that footage was wearing items, a holster, gloves, that Hillman described as, quote, kind of junior varsity. Not the equipment of a professional, but also not impulsive. The gloves were purchased. The camera was partially obscured. This was someone who thought about it, just not someone who had done it many times before. What that footage translates into, behaviorally, is a person who understood surveillance existed and made an attempt to counter it, but lacked the discipline or experience to vanish cleanly. That is a profile. It is also a timeline pressure. The longer the footage circulates, the greater the chance that someone, somewhere, recognizes a walk, a build, a pair of shoes. Savannah Guthrie has spoken publicly about ransom demands, multiple contacts, only 2 of which the family considers potentially authentic. The family released a video statement. We live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. That specificity, we need proof of life, tells you something about what the family has and has not received. RE Hook number 2, 6 o'clock. The FBI says it was kept out of the investigation for 4 days. The Pima County Sheriff says the FBI was there from day one. Both cannot be true. And the answer to that contradiction may determine whether the most critical early hours of this case were lost. Act 2, 6 to 9 o'clock. FBI Director Kash Patel stated publicly on the Hangout with Sean Hannity podcast that federal investigators were kept out of the case for 4 days following Nancy's disappearance. Sheriff Nanos pushed back directly, telling People magazine that the FBI was present from the beginning and that the two agencies have maintained a working relationship throughout. Those statements cannot both be accurate. And the reason it matters, the reason it lands with force inside the deliberate blind spot framework, is timing. The first 72 hours of a missing persons case are historically its most productive window. Evidence degrades. Witnesses' memories compress. Surveillance footage gets overwritten on rolling loops. If there was a 4-day delay in federal forensic resources reaching the scene, the cost of that delay is not hypothetical. According to Hillman, the jurisdictional question here is not straightforward. Local law enforcement leads a missing persons case unless there is clear evidence of interstate flight or kidnapping. In those early hours, before the blood was found, before the camera footage was analyzed, this looked to some like a silver alert, an elderly woman who may have wandered. The classification changed. The response may not have changed fast enough. Hillman told Law and Crime directly, "The first couple days were bizarre because it started out just as a missing person and then it led to, hey, there's blood. There's evidence that she was abducted. That reclassification window is where the institutional seam sits. Meanwhile, the DNA timeline is its own pressure. Sheriff Nanos confirmed unknown DNA was recovered from the scene. Lab analysis is ongoing. He told People, I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor is, but I think they're getting closer to finding out who that was. The labs have not said they are finished. That distinction, active versus exhausted, is the difference between an investigation and a cold case. Over 13,000 tips reported to the FBI. Thousands of video files cataloged by the Sheriff's Department. A reward exceeding $1 million, and not one confirmed claim. RE Hook number 3, 9 o'clock. $1 million reward. 13,000 tips. Unknown DNA sitting in a lab. And still, not one person has come forward to collect. The silence around that reward is not absence of information. It is a data point about who is protecting whom. Act 2 continues. 9 to 1,300 hours. Hillman worked a documented Arizona cold case, the Canal murders, for 3.5 years. His team processed roughly 1,000 tips, vetting each potential suspect individually before requesting DNA. That is the operational reality of large-scale evidence management. It is not glamorous, it is not fast, and it is not visible from the outside. He described it to Law and Crime as going down a list. Hey, do we want to go get this guy's DNA? Do we not? And doing that for years. The Pima County investigation is compressing that same process under public scrutiny, celebrity pressure, and federal agency tension. The sheriff acknowledged the pressure directly. Nobody wants to make a false arrest. Nobody wants to falsely accuse somebody. That is not evasion. That is case architecture, building the evidentiary structure that can withstand cross-examination in a courtroom. Here is the geography that matters. Nancy's home sits in Tucson proper. The nearest major interstate is I-10, which runs toward Phoenix to the north and toward El Paso and the Texas border to the east. The U.S.-Mexico border at Nogales is roughly 65 miles south, under an hour by car. Hillman assessed, based on Nancy's limited mobility, that she was transported by vehicle. The Ring camera grid around her neighborhood is dense. The fact that no footage has publicly surfaced of a vehicle entering or leaving cleanly suggests either that the route was chosen for its camera gaps, or that the footage exists and has not been disclosed. The silence from anyone who might recognize the figure in that footage is what Hillman called just odd. In a neighborhood where purchases were traced to a specific Walmart, In a city where Ring cameras cover nearly every block, the absence of a single identification speaks to someone either unknown to the community or protected by someone within it. The ransom channel adds another layer. The Guthrie family confirmed they have received what they consider 2 potentially authentic contacts. They have not confirmed those contacts as verified. The FBI has not confirmed an active ransom negotiation. The family's public statement asked for proof of life, which means as of the date of that statement, they did not have it. Savannah Guthrie told the Today Show, "The investigation is still going, and people have worked tirelessly. But we need answers. We cannot be at peace without knowing." That sentence, "we cannot be at peace without knowing," is not a media statement. It is a family telling the public exactly where they are. RE Hook number 4, 1300 hours. The suspect on that footage was not a professional. The planning was real, the gloves, the holster, the partial camera obstruction. But the execution left trace everywhere. That combination, prepared but not experienced, points toward a motive more personal than random. Act 3:13 to 1600 hours. The deliberate blind spot at the center of this case is not forensic. It is structural, and it has 2 faces. The first is institutional. The FBI local conflict, whatever its exact duration and cause, created a seam in the early investigation. That seam may be where critical hours fell through. No agency has formally accounted for the timeline of federal involvement. Sheriff Nanos has denied any gap. Director Patel has stated one publicly. The discrepancy has not been resolved in any documented public forum, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department has not released an official chronology of when each resource was activated. The second face is the reward silence. $1 million, 13,000 tips, and no confirmed claimant. Hillman's Reed. The person who knows something may be someone who fears the person they would be identifying. That fear does not operate in a vacuum. It operates within a relationship, a household, a workplace, a town. Someone near this case is carrying knowledge they have not surrendered. The reward existing and going unclaimed is not a mystery. It is a portrait of that person's calculation. On motive, Hillman returned consistently to one axis: Savannah Guthrie. Not blame, he was explicit about that. But the vector. Someone who wanted leverage over a public figure, wanted to stop something, wanted to send a message. The Today Show reaches roughly 3 million viewers on an average morning. Savannah Guthrie's face is in American homes daily. Her mother's existence, her hometown, her medical history, all of it is publicly searchable. The profile that emerges from the footage, the planning, and the motive calculus is someone who researched this family before they acted. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She requires medication. She has limited mobility. Hillman said plainly, "It's hard to say if Nancy's safe at this point. It's not looking good because of her medical history." That assessment is not pessimism. It is the operational reality that frames every hour this case remains open. What the case has exposed structurally is this: the United States has no mandatory federal jurisdiction trigger for missing elderly persons in circumstances that initially appear consistent with wandering. The first classification of this case, missing person, possible silver alert, delayed the activation of federal forensic resources that a kidnapping classification would have triggered immediately. That gap is a policy question, not an individual failure. It will apply to the next case and the one after that unless it is named and addressed. The labs are still running. The tips are still coming in. The sheriff says his team will solve it. Resolution: 16 to 1800 hours. This is what the record shows as of today. An 84-year-old woman was taken from her home in Tucson, Arizona on or around January 31st. Her blood was found at the scene. A second DNA profile was recovered and remains unidentified. Security footage captured an individual approaching her home wearing gloves and a holster, items traced to a Walmart purchase. That individual has not been publicly identified. The FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department have both claimed involvement from the beginning of the investigation. Their accounts of the first 4 days do not align. Over 13,000 tips have been reported. A reward exceeding $1 million has produced no confirmed claimant. 2 ransom contacts have been assessed by the Guthrie family as potentially authentic. Neither has been verified as legitimate by law enforcement. No arrest has been made. The Guthrie family has not stopped. Savannah Guthrie continues to speak publicly. The family continues to ask for proof of life. Every statement they release is a signal sent into the open. We are here, we are listening, show us she is alive. Retired Sergeant Troy Hillman, who spent years solving a cold case in this same state, said something that belongs in the record. All you need is one little morsel of information to lead you in a certain direction, and then the whole case could unravel. He is right. These cases do not always break on the largest piece of evidence. They break on the detail that was always there, waiting for someone to connect it to the thing sitting next to it. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her family deserves the answer they have spent more than 100 days waiting for. And the system that classified her disappearance as a possible silver alert in those first hours, before anyone looked at the blood, deserves a direct question that no one has publicly posed to the relevant agencies. At what point does the initial classification of an elderly missing person trigger mandatory federal involvement? And who is responsible for that decision in the first 24 hours? That question does not have a clean answer yet. But it has a name now. Outro: 1800 hours. If you know anything about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts, anything, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI are both accepting tips. $1 million reward is still unclaimed. Somewhere, someone is doing that math and choosing silence. That choice is the last remaining variable in this case. What I keep coming back to is the classification window. Those first hours when this looked like a silver alert and the federal clock was not yet running. The deliberate blind spot was not in the evidence. It was in the system that decided what kind of case this was before anyone had looked carefully enough to know. Subscribe now, because when the DNA lab returns its finding, or when the next ransom contact is verified or isn't, this channel will be the first place that result gets broken down completely with the full case file behind it. One question before you go. Should a missing elderly person with evidence of blood at the scene automatically trigger mandatory FBI jurisdiction within the first 24 hours? Yes or no? Leave your answer below. That debate is the one this case just opened for the next family it happens to.